How's it going, my bakers? Hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I have another application of the dark rye bread dough, so let's go to the kitchen and check it out. The inspiration for this recipe came from our resident bread guru, Kevin. He mentioned that he's working on a rye ciabatta recipe, and that instantly sparked an idea in my mind. As soon as I read his comment, I started writing this recipe. Seeing what I've made here, and comparing it to what Kevin has posted on our Flickr group, I can say we have created very different breads. His one is more like an actual ciabatta. Mine is more of a rye bread roll, made by using some ciabatta making techniques, but both are great in my opinion. It just goes to show that different bakers could take the same idea and create completely different breads. And that's what I love about bread making. It's all about your interpretation. And of course, since this is one of my favorite doughs ever, I'm happy to have found another application for it. Soft and bouncy rye bread is just the best. So let me show you how it's made, and let's see what exactly we need. This recipe is split up into two parts, the main dough and the scald. For the main dough, we'll need some white bread flour, whole grain rye flour, water, yeast, salt, and some kind of sweet syrup. I'm using barley malt syrup. You can use honey, you can use maple syrup, or you can leave it out. It is there for extra flavor and for sweetness. Okay, for scalding, we'll need some whole grain rye flour, some plain mashed potato, caraway seeds, some boiling water, and the magic ingredient, the fermented rye malt powder. This is what makes dark rye bread dark. It gives it a unique color, taste, and aroma. But you can make these rolls without it. They'll still be great. But it's definitely worth seeking out this ingredient. I usually find it on eBay. And last but not least, we'll need some seeds for coating the rolls. I'm using sunflower seeds. As for the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and a spray bottle with water would be very handy. This helps with creating a very soft crust on these rolls. And it's a great tool for steaming. If you are baking bread at home regularly, this is definitely one tool to have. And they are very affordable. And if you want to learn more about steaming, there's a video about that in the Principles of Baking playlist. And last but not least, we'll need a tray with some non-stick paper for baking. As you can see, there's not much equipment required for this recipe. Okay, let's start making our dough. And it all begins with a scald. In a small bowl, combine the caraway seeds, the rye malt powder, the whole grain rye flour, the mashed potato, and boiling water. The scalded flour and the mashed potato work together to give this bread a nice bouncy texture. To learn more about the use of potatoes and scalding, look for the dedicated videos in the Principles of Baking playlist. Once the mix is done, cover it up and leave it to cool down completely. I left it to sit for around 2 hours. During that time, it cooled down to about room temperature. And just for reference, my kitchen is about 20 degrees Celsius, and that's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course that means that the remaining flour for this recipe is at room temperature. Because we're aiming for a final dough temperature of around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius or 75 to 77 Fahrenheit, I'm using slightly warmer water at about 25 degrees Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit. That is a relatively high temperature for water when making bread, but of course we're making this using the no-knead method, which means that this dough is not going to warm up too much during mixing. Okay, to continue, in a large bowl, combine the water, the yeast, the salt, and the malt syrup, or any syrup that you're using. Give it all a good mix to dissolve the salt and the syrup completely. Then add the scald. Keep mixing until everything is nice and smooth, then continue by adding the flours. I'm adding the rye flour first, then mixing it in, and then adding the final ingredient, which is the white bread flour. Then keep mixing until there's no dry flour left. And that's the dough done. All we need to do from here is give it a few folds to give it some strength, and that'll be it. Folding replaces kneading in no-knead recipes, and pretty much any bread can be made using the no-knead method. So far, I haven't run into a single recipe that can't be made using the no-knead method. I even made some no-knead brioche recently. That really proves the point. Okay, the dough is fully mixed, but it's quite sticky because of the rye flour. I'm wetting my hands with water to handle it. Pop it in a clean bowl and take its temperature. It came out slightly cooler than I wanted it to, but it's no big deal. I'm going to leave it to rest at room temperature. I'll let it sit for around 15 minutes. If your dough is warmer, pop it in the fridge straight away and also leave it to sit for 15 minutes. After the first 15 minutes, we need to give this dough a fold. Dust it with some flour because it is quite sticky. Pop it out on the table with the smooth side down, then flatten it and then fold it up on all sides. First, fold the top third down, then turn the dough around, repeat the same step on the other side, and then do exactly the same on the left and right sides. This dough is not very stretchy. Folding it like this is the appropriate method this time. Okay, after the fold, it goes back into the bowl. I'm going to pop it in the fridge for 15 more minutes. After 15 minutes of chilling, take it out and give it one more fold. And the second fold is performed exactly the same way as the first one. And that's all there is to it. Now we can place this back into the fridge or leave it to cold ferment for 12 to 24 hours or even longer. And here it is, it's the next day, the dough is puffed up beautifully. And now comes the fun part, final shaping, which we're going to perform similarly to a ciabatta. And we're going to use an interesting method for making the seeds stick to the dough. We'll be working inside the tray to avoid making a mess on the table. Pour the seeds into the tray, you want a nice thick layer. Of course we're not going to use them all, but we're also not wasting any. It's just that having a lot of seeds makes the job a lot easier. To make the seeds really stick, heavily wet the surface of the dough. Dip your hand in water and brush it all over. Make sure that the surface is properly wet. Now using your scraper, release the dough from the bowl and place it with the watered side down on the seeds. Now we need to press it into the seeds, but the dough is quite sticky, so dust the bottom with flour. Then continue by pressing it down firmly using the palms of your hands and the flat parts of your fingers. Don't press it down using your fingertips. You can lift it up once in a while, make sure there's enough seeds underneath it. Shake the tray a little bit and place the dough back down and press it once again. We're not only trying to stick the seeds to the dough, we're also trying to flatten the dough, because we need to cut this into 4 pieces. And to make them nice and neat and square, trim the edges first. After trimming, cut the dough into 4, and that's our little rye bread rolls done. It's a cool little method for making the seeds stick to the dough. Okay, let's place the rolls on the non-stick paper lined tray. I squished the trimmings together to make one round roll. And of course, if you're going to make a larger batch, like doubling or tripling the recipe, you'll end up with more rolls in relation to trimmings. The remaining seeds can go back into the bowl, ready for the next use. Right, let's cover these bad boys up, they are ready for the final proof. It took me around 1.5 hours at 23 degrees Celsius or 73 Fahrenheit. During the final hour of fermentation, you want to preheat your oven, 180 degrees Celsius with the fan on. I have been baking on higher temperatures with the fan on lately. I find that it helps color the rolls evenly on all sides. If your oven doesn't have a fan, increase the temperature by about 10%. Okay, before the rolls go in the oven, spray them with water. This will help them expand as they bake. Okay, these bad boys are ready for the oven. Let's pop them in there and we'll bake them for 20 minutes initially. Give the inside of the oven a good spritz as well. After the first 20 minutes of baking, they won't be quite done. While the inside might be ready, we are not finished with the crust yet. To make it extra soft and bouncy, we'll use the same method that I showed with my rye bread loaf recipe. And that's where the spray bottle comes in again. You want to completely soak the surface. I guess you could even just dunk them in a bowl of water. And straight away, pop them back into the oven for another 5 minutes of baking. This method is short of magic. And that's all there is to it. That's how you make seed encrusted rye bread rolls. This is a great application for the dark rye bread dough, at least in my opinion. The flavor is amazing, it's very rich, the dough is nicely fermented, the texture is very soft and it'll stay soft for a good few days. And of course they are super easy to make. Shout out to Kevin for the inspiration, and if you're interested in our little community on Flickr, go check it out, it's linked below. It's just a nice place for sharing your bakes. You can see how people got on with my recipes, clearly proving that they all work, because of course bread making is not about recipes, it's about techniques. Just as I demonstrated in this video, I used the recipe from one bread and applied the techniques used for making a completely different kind of bread, and I'm very happy with the result. I really encourage you to experiment more. Even if you fail, you'll still get something edible. So what do you think this recipe? Is it a good use for the dark rye bread dough? Let me know down in the comments. You want to see more videos like this one? Click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.